A kind nurse comforts a dying patient, not knowing he's a wealthy man who will leave her a fortune. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the hospital, turning the world beyond into a blur of gray. Thunder growled in the distance like a warning, and fluorescent lights flickered ever so slightly in the hallway. The night shift had just begun, and silence clung to the corridors like a heavy blanket. Emma rolled the chart cart into room 308. She paused for a moment at the door, straightened her navy blue scrub top, and took a deep breath. The nurse's station had whispered about this new patient, elderly, terminal, no visitors, no known family. Just another soul slipping quietly through the cracks. She pushed the door open gently. Inside, the room was dim. Only the light from the corridor cast a soft glow on the frail figure lying in the bed. He was a thin man with sunken cheeks, silver hair clinging to his damp forehead. Machines hummed steadily beside him. He looked like a shadow of someone who once stood tall. Emma stepped closer. "Good evening, Mr. Howard," she said softly, checking his IV. "I'm Emma. I'll be your nurse tonight." He stirred slightly at the sound of her voice. His lips parted, and with a hoarse, trembling breath, he spoke. "I don't want to die alone." His voice was barely more than a whisper, but the words hit Emma like a punch to the chest. She moved to his side without hesitation, pulling a chair close and sitting beside the bed. "You won't be alone," she said, gently taking his cold hand in hers. "No one deserves to leave this world without someone beside them." His fingers tightened slightly around hers, fragile but desperate. Emma offered a soft smile, even as her throat tightened. "Do you want me to read to you?" she asked, reaching into her coat pocket. "I always carry a book." He blinked, slowly. It was enough. Emma pulled out a small paperback, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and opened it to where she had last left off. Her voice was calm, steady, as she read to him. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the room, a strange peace settled between them. As the minutes turned into an hour, and then another, Mr. Howard drifted in and out of sleep, lulled by the steady cadence of Emma's voice. At times he would open his eyes and watch her, not with fear, but something closer to awe, as if he couldn't believe someone was really there. Emma didn't leave. She didn't glance at the clock or check her phone. She just read, and when her voice tired, she hummed softly old lullabies her mother used to sing before she passed. "I'm not important," he murmured suddenly, eyes still closed. Emma looked at him. "That's not true. I'm just an old man. No one will remember me." "I will," she said gently. "I'll remember tonight. I'll remember you." His lips quivered, but he said nothing more. In the quiet that followed, Emma studied his face. There was a certain grace in it, despite the illness. Something refined. His hands, though thin by age, were smooth, his nails carefully trimmed. Not the hands of someone who had lived on the margins. Still, she didn't pry. Didn't ask who he had been. It didn't matter now. To her, he was just Mr. Howard, the man who didn't want to die alone. She stayed with him until the clock struck 3 in the morning. By then, the storm had softened into a drizzle. The monitors beeped steadily, and he was sleeping more soundly now, his breath a little deeper. Emma stood slowly, careful not to wake him. She placed the book on the side table and covered his hand with the blanket. But as she turned to leave, his voice broke the silence once more. "Emma." She turned. "Yes, Mr. Howard." His eyes fluttered open, glistening with something more than just fatigue. "You remind me of someone I once knew." She smiled. "Someone good, I hope." He nodded weakly. "Someone who saw me." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. "I see you," she whispered. And with that, she turned off the lamp, leaving only the hallway light glowing faintly through the door. As she stepped out, she paused once more to glance back. Mr. Howard lay quietly, no longer trembling, no longer alone. She didn't know who he truly was. Not yet. But tonight, none of that mattered. Emma lived in a small apartment just above a florist shop on the quieter side of town. It wasn't much, 2 rooms, a kitchenette, and windows that overlooked the alley, but it was enough. She'd lived alone for the past 10 years, ever since her younger brother had moved out for college. Her life was simple: work, books, and the occasional weekend walks in the park when the weather allowed. She didn't complain. Emma wasn't the type to dwell on what was missing, but in her quietest moments, when the city was asleep and her tea had gone cold, she sometimes wondered what life could have been if things had gone differently. She had once dreamed of becoming a doctor, She had the grades, the passion, the vision, but life had a way of rewriting plans. When her mother passed suddenly from a stroke, Emma was only 19. With her father long gone and no extended family nearby, she dropped out of school to raise her 10-year-old brother, working nights at a diner while studying part-time to become a nurse. It wasn't the dream, but it became a purpose. Now, at 32, Emma had made peace with her path. She wasn't a doctor, but she was a caregiver, and she was good at it. Emma was the nurse who stayed late, who brought extra soup for patients who didn't like hospital food, who remembered birthdays and sang lullabies to dementia patients when the nights got too quiet. She treated every patient like they were someone's beloved, because once someone had treated her mother like that too. But some patients stayed with her longer than others. Mr. Howard was one of them. Something about his silence haunted her. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then his answers were brief, almost guarded. But his eyes, they carried weight, like they had seen too much and felt even more. Emma found herself checking on him more often than necessary, not out of obligation but out of instinct. One evening she stayed after her shift, bringing him a warm slice of banana bread from the cafeteria. "You didn't eat much today," she said softly, setting it down on the tray table. Mr. Howard looked at the bread, then at her. "You don't have to do this." Emma smiled gently. "I know." He studied her face for a moment, as if searching for something. Then, almost reluctantly, he took a bite. The room was quiet for a while. Rain tapped gently against the window, a soft rhythm to their silence. "You work too much," he said suddenly. Emma laughed. "That's what my brother says." "You have a brother?" She nodded. "He's the reason I'm here, actually. I was going to be a doctor, but when our mom passed, someone had to raise him." There was a flicker in Mr. Howard's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or something deeper. "You gave up your dream?" Emma shrugged. "Not really. I just changed it. Now I help people in a different way. That's still worth something, right?" He didn't respond right away, just stared at the rain. And then, without warning, his voice cracked. "You remind me of someone?" Emma looked at him, surprised by the sudden emotion. "Someone I lost," he continued, tears welling in his eyes. "She was kind like you. Always saw more than what people showed. She had the kind of heart that made you want to be better." Emma sat down beside his bed, gently placing her hand on his frail fingers. "What happened to her?" she asked softly. But Mr. Howard didn't answer. He just offered a sad smile, his eyes glossy and distant. Emma didn't press. She knew grief when she saw it. In that moment she realized something. Mr. Howard wasn't just sick. He was broken. Not physically, but somewhere deeper, where medicine couldn't reach. She squeezed his hand gently. Whoever she was, she must have been very special. "She was everything," he whispered. And then, as if exhausted by the memory, he closed his eyes. Emma sat with him long after his breathing had steadied, her own heart heavy with questions. Who had this man been before the hospital bed? What had he lost? And why did it feel like he was still waiting for something? Or someone? She didn't know it yet. But soon the answers would find her. The hospital days rolled on as they always did, quiet shifts blending into one another, the rhythm of beeping machines, muffled voices, the smell of antiseptic and fresh linens. But for Emma, the hours she spent in room 308 each night began to feel different, more human, more real. Every evening after her rounds, she brought something small for Mr. Howard, a slice of toast with honey, homemade banana muffins from the nurse's lounge, or a thermos of chamomile tea she swore helped with sleep. She even brought her old portable speaker one night, softly playing Chopin and Debussy, watching his eyes flutter closed in peace. Some nights she talked, about her childhood, about her brother who now worked in community health across the state, about how she used to sneak into the university library just to read medical books she couldn't afford. Other nights they sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. Over time, Mr. Howard's demeanor began to shift. The guarded edge softened. The sorrow in his eyes didn't disappear, but it became less sharp. He began asking Emma questions, not many but enough. About her favorite books, her thoughts on kindness, why she never wore makeup even though she had, in his words, a face meant for it. Emma always laughed and brushed him off. But inside she began to feel something unfamiliar stirring. A quiet bond, fragile but deeply rooted in sincerity. One rainy night, as the world outside the hospital walls turned silver and blurred, Mr. Howard broke their usual pattern of quiet. "I wasn't always like this," he said suddenly, staring at the ceiling. "Weak. Alone." Emma, seated beside him with a cup of tea, turned toward him gently. "I don't think you're weak." He gave a small smile, one corner of his mouth lifting. "You're kind to say that, but the truth is, I had everything once. Or thought I did." Emma said nothing, letting the moment open on its own. "There was a girl," he continued. "Her name was Claire. We met in college. She loved art and wind chimes and hated everything about business. She used to laugh at how obsessed I was with stocks and spreadsheets." He paused, his breath catching a little, as if saying her name was both a comfort and a wound. "I wanted to give her the world, but I got lost chasing it instead." Emma leaned forward. "What happened?" "I built an empire," he said bitterly, "and I lost her. She waited for me to slow down, to see her. But I didn't. Not until it was too late. She left. She didn't want money. She just wanted me to come home early and dance with her in the kitchen." He turned his face toward Emma then. His eyes shimmered, wet with memory. "She died 10 years ago. Cancer. I didn't even know until months after. She never called me. Never told me." Emma's throat tightened. She reached out, taking his hand. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. Mr. Howard stared at their joined hands for a long time before whispering, "You remind me of her. Not in how you look, but in the way you sit with people. In the way you see what others miss." Emma blinked back the sting in her eyes. She had no words, only presence. From that night on, their conversations deepened. He shared fragments of his past, not names, not fortunes, but memories that hinted at a life once filled with power and loneliness. She listened, not with curiosity for wealth or scandal, but with the compassion of someone who understood regret. One evening, as golden light poured into the room and a faint sonata played in the background, Mr. Howard looked over at her and asked, "If you had one wish for the future, what would it be?" Emma smiled, not needing to think. "I'd wish for enough," she said. "Enough to live simply. Enough to care for people the way they deserve. Enough to never turn someone away because I couldn't afford to help." Mr. Howard stared at her for a long time. "Not riches? Not recognition?" She shook her head. "No, those things are loud, and they fade. I just want peace, and the ability to give it." A silence settled then, thick with something unsaid. In that moment, Emma didn't realize she had become something more than a nurse. She was no longer just the one who brought toast and turned pillows. She had become the final heartbeat of a man who once owned everything, and now, for the first time in years, had someone he didn't want to lose. And though she didn't know it yet, her quiet presence had already begun to change the course of his life, and what remained of it. Rain beat violently against the hospital windows, the storm outside warring with the quiet stillness of the late-night corridors. Emma had finished her shift an hour earlier, but realized she had left her stethoscope in Mr. Howard's room. She returned quickly, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor as thunder cracked somewhere beyond the building. As she approached room 308, voices, sharp, angry, unfamiliar, sliced through the quiet. Emma paused, heart tightening. "You think I've stood by your side all these years for love?" A woman's voice snapped. Elegant, steely. "Howard, don't flatter yourself." Emma moved closer, stopping just outside the door, which was left slightly ajar. Through the narrow crack, she saw Mr. Howard sitting upright in bed, visibly trembling, his breathing labored. Across from him stood a woman in a tailored trench coat, her dark red lipstick stark against her pale skin. Her diamond earrings sparkled like icicles under the fluorescent lights. It was the first time Emma had ever seen her. "Linda," Mr. Howard's voice was hoarse, weary. "Please, not now." "Oh, it's exactly now," Linda shot back, tossing a thick folder onto the bedside table. "Sign the papers, transfer the assets. Everything to me and Alex, as we agreed." Howard's eyes widened. "We never agreed. Those were your plans, never mine." Linda crossed her arms, her voice low but venomous. "Do you want to die alone, Howard? Do you want the staff here to throw your ashes in a pauper's field while your precious Emma reads fairy tales over your grave?" Emma stiffened. Linda's voice rose. "You were a joke after Claire died. A sad, sentimental fool who gave up everything. I saved your reputation. I married you so people would stop whispering about the lonely widower with too much money and no heir." Mr. Howard's face twisted in pain, not just physical, but emotional, cutting deep. "You didn't save me, you used me. You and your son." "Watch your mouth," Linda spat. Alex has done more for your image than you ever deserved. Now sign the papers, or we walk." Emma couldn't stay silent any longer. Before she could fully think it through, she pushed the door open and stepped into the room. "Stop," she said firmly. "That's enough." Linda turned, startled, then sneered. Well, the nurse, the saint." Her voice dripped sarcasm. "Come to wipe his tears, or take a piece of the will too." Emma ignored the insult and moved quickly to Mr. Howard's side, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. His hand found hers, squeezing with surprising strength. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his body betrayed him, shaking from rage or heartbreak, or both. Emma turned to Linda, her eyes calm but unwavering. "You need to leave, now." Linda narrowed her eyes. "You think you can boss me around?" "I'm his wife?" "And this is a hospital," Emma replied, voice still even. "And he's a patient under care. Your behavior is abusive and threatening. I will report this to hospital administration and, if necessary, security." For a moment, silence settled like static. Then, with a snarl, Linda stepped forward, too close. "You don't know what you're getting involved in, little girl." Emma didn't flinch. "I know enough. Now leave." Linda's eyes darted between Emma and Howard, and for a flicker of a second, something like panic passed through her expression. Then she raised her hand and slapped Mr. Howard across the face. The crack echoed louder than the thunder outside. Emma reacted instantly. She stepped between them, furious and protective. "Get out," she said, voice shaking not with fear but fury. "If you come near him again, I will call the police." Linda's eyes widened at the sudden change in Emma's tone. She backed away, her mask of control faltering. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Both of you." Then she spun on her heels and stormed out, her heels clicking violently against the tile. Emma rushed to Mr. Howard, gently checking the redness on his cheek, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He looked at her, and for the first time, Emma saw him fully, not as a sick man, not as a forgotten elder, but as someone who had once held immense power and had lost it all to the wrong people. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he murmured. Emma held his gaze. "You're not just a man in this bed, are you?" He nodded faintly. "I was someone once, someone important. But none of it matters now." Emma pulled a chair beside him and took his hand again. "You matter now. And that's enough for me." Thunder rolled again, softer this time, and in the fragile silence that followed, Mr. Howard closed his eyes, not out of fear or shame, but with something close to relief. Because someone, finally, had chosen him for who he was in this moment, not for what he had been or what he owned. The morning after the storm, the hospital felt heavier somehow, thicker with silence, with tension. The sun had returned, slanting through the high windows, but it didn't bring warmth. Emma paused outside room 308, her fingers curled around the doorknob. After the confrontation with Linda, she hadn't slept. Her thoughts ran in circles all night, about the slap, about the papers, about the name she'd heard whispered in anger. Howard Whitmore. It echoed in her mind like the closing line of a book she hadn't finished reading. She pushed open the door gently. Mr. Howard sat propped up against his pillows, eyes closed, but his face was no longer pale. It was flushed, strained, a quiet war playing beneath his skin. He opened his eyes as she entered. "You came back," he said. Emma sat down without a word, her eyes meeting his. "I need to know the truth." He studied her for a long moment. Then he gave a slow, tired nod. "My full name is Howard Whitmore," he said, his voice even, though weathered with sorrow. "I founded Whitmore Capital nearly 4 decades ago. We managed billions. Expanded globally. People said I had the Midas touch." Emma felt her chest tighten. Of course. She had heard the name, who hadn't? One of the few men who walked away from it all. "I remember," she whispered. "You vanished after your wife died. No one knew why." "She was my anchor," Howard said, his voice now softer. "Claire was everything good in me. I chased success while she built a life around the small, beautiful things. Sunlight in the kitchen, music on Sundays, laughter when I came home late. And I thought she'd always be there." He swallowed hard. "But cancer doesn't wait. And I was too proud, too busy. She left this world with me still in a board meeting." Emma's throat burned. She couldn't imagine that kind of regret. "I tried to go back after," Howard continued. to keep building, to stay distracted. But the numbers stopped meaning anything. The offices felt cold, so I walked away. Sold the company. Gave most of it to causes Claire believed in. Disappeared from everything, except my name. And Linda? Emma asked gently. I met her at a gala for one of the charities, he said. She was charming, strong, said the right things. I thought maybe I could start again. I was tired of being alone. He looked away. But she didn't love me. She tolerated me. Played the role when the world was watching. And when the world turned its eyes elsewhere, so did she. Her son was the same. A parasite in a nice suit. Emma blinked, tears slipping free despite her trying to hold them back. You had everything but no one real. Howard turned back to her, his eyes filled with something heavy but clear. Until now. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it. I don't want anything from you, she whispered. I just want you to be seen, and to know that you're not alone. For a moment, neither spoke. The machines hummed beside them, soft and steady. Then Howard reached toward the nightstand and pulled out a small, unmarked envelope. He held it out to her with a hand that trembled not from weakness, but from finality. Take this, he said. It's my new will. I had it drafted months ago, when I first realized how far gone things were with Linda. I didn't know then who it would go to. I only knew I didn't want them to have it. Emma stared at the envelope, frozen. I can't, she began. You can, he said firmly. You must. Don't open it. Not yet. But if something happens to me, it's yours to present. It's been signed, witnessed, and registered. All it needs is someone I trust. Emma's voice cracked. Why me? Because you're the first person who's looked at me and seen more than what I've lost. Because you brought me toast and tea and music. Because you made me feel human again. Her hands shook as she took the envelope, pressing it to her chest. I'll keep it safe, she said softly. But I hope I never have to open it. Howard smiled. Not a businessman's smirk, not the guarded grin of a man used to being disappointed. But something warm, something real. Ah, you already gave me more than money ever did, he said. Emma stayed with him the rest of the day. And when she left that night, the envelope was tucked deep in her coat pocket, next to her heart. She didn't know what it contained, but she knew she would protect it, just like she'd protect the man who had placed his last bit of faith in her. The peace after Emma's promise didn't last long. Just 3 days later, Linda and her son Alex stormed back into the hospital, unannounced, uninvited, and unwelcome. Dressed in sleek black coats and designer sunglasses, they moved through the lobby like they owned it. Emma saw them from the nurse's station and instantly knew they had found out about the new will. They didn't confront Mr. Howard right away. Instead, they tried manipulating staff. Emma overheard them speaking with Carly, another nurse, feeding her lines about missing paperwork and family matters. Emma intervened quickly, pulling Carly aside. They're lying, she warned. Don't give them anything. That night, Emma scanned the will and sent it to Mr. Howard's private attorney. She also made a notarized copy and locked it in her locker under a false name. Still, she couldn't sleep. The next day, a man in a gray suit appeared, claiming to be a legal advisor. He demanded access to Howard's files, trying to intimidate the front desk. Emma stepped in firmly. You're not authorized. Please leave. He did, but Linda returned. Alone this time. She found Emma in the hallway, walking toward Mr. Howard's room. Funny what a nurse will do for a fortune, Linda hissed. I'm not after his money, Emma said. No, Linda sneered, stepping closer. Just his trust, his signature. Emma stayed calm. He's not a prize. Then suddenly Linda lunged, grabbing at Emma's coat. Emma backed away, but Linda shoved her hard against the wall, clawing for the envelope. Emma fell, clutching it tight to her chest. Hey, what's going on? Carly's voice rang out. A security guard followed close behind. Step back, ma'am, the guard ordered. Now. Linda straightened her coat and scoffed. She tripped. But Emma, still on the floor, said loud and clear, she assaulted me, and tried to steal legal documents from a dying man. Police arrived within minutes. Emma handed over the scanned will, email records, and recorded threats. The hospital launched an immediate investigation. Soon after, Mr. Howard's attorney provided more. Bank records, real estate files, proof of financial abuse by Linda and Alex that stretched far beyond Howard alone. They had conned other elderly victims, laundered money, and falsified signatures. It all came crashing down. Linda was arrested on the spot. Alex was picked up later that night. Emma didn't celebrate. She only felt a quiet ache. Later, she returned to Mr. Howard's room. He was asleep, breathing peacefully. She held his hand and whispered, "They can't hurt you anymore." He stirred slightly and smiled. The morning Mr. Howard passed away was unlike any other. The sun had barely risen when Emma arrived at the hospital, coffee in hand, heart heavy but steady. She didn't know why, but something in her chest told her to come early. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was hope. The hallway was quiet, the lights dimmed. She stepped into room 308 and found him exactly as she feared, but hoped he'd be. Peaceful. He lay still, his head turned slightly toward the window, where a soft beam of golden light touched his cheek. One hand rested on his chest. The other, warm and waiting, was curled open on the bed. Emma walked slowly to his side, setting down her things without a word. She reached for that hand and held it gently, kneeling beside him. His chest rose once, then fell, and then no more. Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent and slow. She had promised to be with him until the end, and she had kept that promise. A few hours later, the hospital director called her into a quiet conference room. Waiting inside was Mr. Whitmore's attorney, a kind-faced man in a crisp gray suit, briefcase in hand. He greeted Emma with a nod and opened a manila folder. As per Mr. Whitmore's final wishes, he began, "This is the reading and execution of his will. You are the primary beneficiary." Emma blinked. "What?" He slid the document forward. Howard Whitmore left his entire personal estate, liquid assets, property, investments, and company shares to you. She shook her head in disbelief. "No, that's not possible. I didn't." "You didn't ask for anything," the lawyer said gently. "That's exactly why he chose you." Emma stared at the paper, the legal language swimming in her vision. The numbers meant nothing to her, not compared to the memory of him smiling over tea, of his voice soft as he spoke of love and loss. "There's more," the attorney continued. "He also allocated a portion, $5 million, to create a foundation in his name, the Howard Foundation. Its mission is to provide end-of-life care and housing support for elderly patients without family or financial means." Emma pressed her hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. She couldn't speak. The lawyer smiled kindly. "He wanted you to lead it, if you're willing." "I don't know how to run a foundation," she whispered. "Mr. Whitmore believed you'd figure it out. He said you had something rarer than experience. He said you had heart." By the end of the day, the story broke. But not about Emma, at least not first. Linda Whitmore and her son Alex were formally charged with multiple counts of fraud, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy to defraud. Investigations into their past dealings revealed years of manipulation, coercion, and forged documents tied to other vulnerable elderly individuals. Bail was denied. Their reputations, carefully constructed illusions, shattered in hours. But when the press turned its attention to the new heir of the Whitmore fortune, they were met with silence. Emma didn't grant interviews. She didn't pose for cameras. She stayed by Mr. Whitmore's bedside until his body was taken away with quiet dignity. She held the envelope he'd given her until the ink on the will had dried. And she began planning, quietly, thoughtfully, the foundation that would bear his name. It wasn't about the money. Not for her. It was about carrying forward a legacy that had almost been buried under lies. It was about making sure no one else died feeling unseen. Mr. Howard had once said that she reminded him of someone he had loved. But in the end, he had loved her too, in a way that transcended words, age, or circumstance. He had given her more than wealth. He had given her trust, purpose, and a second chance at a life filled with meaning. And in return, Emma had given him the greatest gift of all, a peaceful goodbye. Emma Whitmore. The name appeared in headlines, on news tickers, in magazine features and talk show scripts. Overnight, she had become the woman who inherited a fortune from a dying millionaire. The world called it a fairy tale, a miracle, a modern-day twist of fate. But Emma didn't feel like a fairy tale. She still woke up at 6 a.m., laced up her worn sneakers, and walked through the glass doors of the hospital where she had spent the last decade caring for people most others had forgotten. She didn't resign, didn't disappear into the world of wealth and luxury. Because to Emma, none of that had ever mattered. Mr. Howard Whitmore, had given her something no camera could capture, trust. And that, in her heart, was more than enough. The Howard Foundation officially opened its doors 6 months after his passing. Not in a skyscraper or behind frosted glass windows, but in a modest brick building just 5 blocks from the hospital. Its mission was simple: to offer free end-of-life care for elderly patients without family, support, or financial means. A warm bed. A nurse who listened. Music in the evenings. Books by the window. Dignity, when it mattered most. Emma worked there every afternoon after her hospital shifts. She didn't wear heels or suits, just her scrubs, her name badge, and the soft, steady compassion that had once comforted a dying man in room 308. She decorated the rooms herself with wildflowers. She kept a kettle of chamomile tea always ready. She played Chopin softly in the background, just like he liked. The press followed her for a while, calling her the nurse who got everything, the girl who healed a millionaire's heart, the inheritor of kindness. But Emma gave few interviews. She declined photo shoots. She never appeared on stage or accepted speaking awards. When asked why, she said simply, "I didn't receive a fortune. I received someone's faith. And that's worth more than money." Some nights, after the foundation quieted and the hospital emptied, Emma would walk to the old oak bench in the park where Mr. Howard once told her about Claire, the love he'd lost. She'd sit there with a thermos of tea, notebook in her lap, and write. She didn't write for the media or the public. She wrote for him. For every quiet, broken soul who thought their story had ended too soon. And eventually, those pages became a book. The Last Patient I Ever Cared For. It wasn't just about Howard. It was about every hand she'd held, every goodbye she'd whispered, every soft moment that proved death could be met with gentleness, not fear. The book became a quiet bestseller, not because it was glamorous, but because it was honest. It spoke of the kind of love that didn't look like romance, the kind of wealth that didn't come from numbers, the kind of legacy that lived in kindness. In the final chapter, she wrote, "He gave me a key to a door I didn't even know existed, not just to his world, but to a version of myself that believed one small act of compassion could change the course of someone's life. And I was right." Years passed. The foundation grew. More patients came through its doors, men and women with no names on their emergency contacts, no visitors on the holidays. But here they were known, celebrated, loved. And on the walls of each room hung a small, framed quote from Emma's book. "You are not forgotten. You never were." One evening, as twilight spilled across the sky in pink and gold, Emma stood by the window of her modest office. She sipped her tea and looked down at a new intake form, a woman in her 90s with no family, no income, and a note that simply read, "Was once a nurse. Loves poetry." Emma smiled. She would visit her room personally. She would bring her a book and ask what kind of poems she liked best. Because that's what Howard had taught her, that to make someone feel seen, truly seen, was the greatest gift one could give. At the end of her book, just before the acknowledgments, Emma included a single paragraph. It wasn't meant for publicity or applause. It was for those who needed it most. "I was once just an unknown nurse, but a dying man gave me something far greater than money. He gave me the belief that being kind, quietly and without agenda, is enough to make a life worth remembering. And in that, I found my greatest truth, that to live gently, to love without demand, and to show up for someone who feels alone, is how we leave the most enduring legacy of all." And so, from a quiet hospital room to a life forever changed, Emma's story reminds us of something simple and eternal. That kindness, freely given, can echo louder than wealth. That being there, truly there, for someone at their most vulnerable, can change everything. And that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't gold or property. It's the trust of a heart that's been seen, heard, and loved. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of compassion, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here we bring you true tales and heartfelt fiction that remind us all what really matters. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to stir a soul. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story, where love always finds a way.